Welcome to Reformed Thinking. You ever stop and wonder if there's, a single point to all of history? Like one big overarching purpose? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're going to trace God's plan all the way from a promise made to one guy thousands of years ago, right up to the age to come. And we're going to do it by looking at the story of Israel.
Yeah, let's jump right in. The thing is, the Bible is really not subtle about the main point. It lays out a very clear final goal for everything. And this verse from Isaiah, it's about as direct as it gets. Israel's whole purpose is so that God would be glorified in them. That one idea, that's the bedrock for everything else we're going to talk about.
Right, so that leads us to the big question for this whole explainer. If God is really guiding all of history, what we call providence, then what's the end game? What is he actually aiming at? So what is the answer? Well, what we see is that God's ultimate goal is his own glory. It's all about putting his name, his reputation, his character on full display. Now, at the same time, our deepest experience is finding our complete joy and satisfaction in him. And here's the kicker. Those aren't two different goals. They're actually two sides of the very same coin. That really is the central point, isn't it? Our joy in God is the very thing that shows off his glory. Think about it. When we're most satisfied in him, his value is most obvious to everyone. So God getting a name for himself and his people finding their joy in him, they aren't competing. It's the same thing.
And you see this so clearly with a prophet like Habakkuk. He shows that this joy isn't in God's gifts, it's in God himself. He says, look, even if the fig trees don't blossom, there are no grapes on the vines, the olive crop fails, the fields produce no food, even when all of that is gone, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. That shows you that God himself is the prize. He is the treasure.
Okay, so if the end goal of all of history is God's glory seen in the joy of his people, where did a plan this massive even begin? Let's wind the clock back a bit and find the starting point.
Yeah, we've got to go back about 4,000 years.
The whole story of redemption, this huge design to bless the entire world, it starts somewhere you might not expect. It starts with God just choosing one person. And here's the twist. The story kicks off with a man named Abram. And if you look at Joshua 24, it tells us that Abram's family, way back when, they lived beyond the Euphrates and they served other gods. He was an idolater. So God's choice of him had nothing to do with Abram being righteous already. It was all grace. And this is the promise God makes to him that changes everything. It's got two parts that are totally connected. First, I'll make you into a great nation. But second, and this is so important, it was through that one nation that all the families of the earth would be blessed. So from the very start, the plan was always for the whole world. Okay, so that brings up a really good question, right? If the plan was always for the entire world, why did God spend the next couple thousand years focusing mainly on just one nation, Israel? Well, the answer is that Israel was the specific historical vehicle God chose to carry that global plan forward. The Apostle Paul gives us this great picture in Romans 11 to help us understand it. He talks about an olive tree. The root of the tree, that's the promise God made to Abraham. The natural branches growing from it, that's the people of Israel. But, he says, some of those branches were broken off because they didn't believe. And then, he says, wild olive shoots, which represent Gentiles, non-Jews, were grafted into that same tree because of their faith.
So the main takeaway from that whole olive tree picture is this. What connects you to the life of that root isn't your bloodline, it's your faith. Being part of God's people has always been about faith.
Okay, so that leads to another question then. If it's not just about ethnicity, then who exactly is the true Israel that the Bible keeps talking about? Well, Paul deals with this in Romans 9. He says the true children of God are not the children of the flesh. In other words, it's not just about physical descent. No, the true children are the children of the promise. And that includes everyone, whether they're Jew or Gentile, who are counted as offspring because they trust in God's promise. And he even takes it a step further back in Romans 2. He says a true Jew isn't someone who is one outwardly, but inwardly. Real circumcision, he says, is a matter of the heart. It's something done by the Spirit, not just by following the letter of the law. So what really defines God's people is a changed heart.
All right, let's start tying all this together. We've seen God's ultimate goal, And we've seen the historical vehicle he used. So how does the story of this one nation, Israel, really connect to the story of the whole world? This is so critical to get. God doesn't have a plan A for Israel that didn't work out, so he switched to a plan B for the church. No. There's only ever been one story of redemption. God's plan for Israel and his plan for the rest of the world, it's the same plan. It always has been.
So let's recap the whole thing. God has one ultimate goal, his own glory. And that glory is put on display when his people find their deepest joy in him. We saw that Israel was the specific vehicle chosen to bring the Messiah into the world. And it's through the Messiah that the original promise to Abraham, that blessing for all nations, finally comes true. That means Gentiles who have faith become fellow heirs with Jews who have faith. They form one people, the true Israel, all united by the same faith Abraham had.
And that leaves us with something to think about. When you look out at the world, when you think about history, or even just your own life, how does your perspective change when you realize it's all part of one single story, guided by God, moving toward one amazing goal?